Howdy, folks. Don't be confused. Our friend Jan Levine is not in witness protection. He's just has a lighting problem in his abode, and he's here, and we'll have Ack in a few minutes. Jan, I wanted to start talking about this because I wrote about this and I noticed it in Larry Brooks's Slap Shots column, and a lot of the rumors. It's funny. If you follow, and I follow all the reporters for TSN and Sportsnet and the panels that they do. TSN's Insider Trading with Mackenzie Drager and LeBron is excellent, and so is the Saturday Night Headlines with Chris Johnston and Kiprios and Elliot Friedman. And over the last 2 weeks, both of them have centered on the New York Rangers, and at the point where the Rangers are still in a wild card spot. Now they've lost Kreider for an indefinite period of time. They've lost Shattenkirk for an indefinite period of time with this meniscus tear. But they were still hanging in at that point, a point or two in the wild card. Now I think they're a few points behind. They're not playing well, but they were all saying that Jeff Gorton might be preparing them for being in seller mode. Now, to start with that, what do you think of that premise? Because we've had Russ in previous shows has said, with the Knicks sucking badly, he finds it hard to believe that MSG will allow Gorton and Sather to sell because they want dates in April. What do you think?
Well, I mean, so first of all, clearly the dates in April requires you, as you said, to make the playoffs. And right now there's clearly no guarantee they're going to make the playoffs. So they left for the West Coast coming off of two, I would say, decent wins at home after struggling a lot. I mean, they've been very up and down. I think they were 3-5-2 before those two wins. As we talked earlier in the year, they started off the season really poorly at 3-7-2, had a real hot streak. Things seem to be getting better, though if you look at a lot of the advanced metrics, the play of Lundqvist was masking a lot of the ills that exist on this team, which has been the case for several years now. And so the numbers were not great, but they had remained themselves in contention, and I was in the position of, if they can find a way to remediate this stuff, if Kevin Shattenkirk can start playing a bit better, if other things can happen, then maybe they take that step forward and they start to become buyers as opposed to sellers. And now what's happened is they go to the West Coast. The game ends Colorado. The only reason why they stayed in that game is because the goaltending was so good, because if not, they would have gotten completely knocked out of that game. Mm-hmm. Then they have the Sunday night game where the first game against LA, they jump to a 2-0 lead. And unfortunately, as we've all seen, 2-0 leads in the Rangers in LA do not go very well, given the past history harkening back to 2014. And they lose that game after giving up 3 power play goals. And that started more of the conversation of, all right, maybe we should be sellers. And then, of course, the game they played the other night against Anaheim, they actually didn't play badly. Mm-hmm. They outshot Anaheim 18-8 in the first period. However, when 4 of those 8 shots go in the goal, you're not playing particularly well. And if you look at the goals, the J.T. Brown goal was a short side shot that maybe should have been stopped by Lundqvist, was a 2-on-1 because of a shot that echoed out of the zone and created a 2-on-1. Then you look at the power play goal where it was a bad change by the Rangers and they came in on a clear breakaway and scored there. Then the third goal was David Descharnais backing up and giving Cogliano a shot top shelf. And the fourth goal was a shorthanded opportunity on a really bad play by J.T. Miller that got him sat the rest of the game, that gave Henrique a breakaway, and he basically undressed Andrei Pavlik on his first goal, right? So you look at the game, you cut it, then you cut it to 4-3, you got a shot, and you take a penalty at the end of second period, another penalty to start the third. It's a 5-on-3. As soon as that 5-on-3 scores, they score Anaheim to make it 5-3. And now you've lost 3 in a row on the road. Mm-hmm. You've got, as you said, as we said before this, you have Chris Kreider out indefinitely. You have Kevin Shattenkirk out indefinitely. Your puck possession is basically in name only because they never possess the puck. You're giving up over 30 shots a game. I think the net differential shots per game between shots attempted and shots against is about 8 per game. Right. Which is impossible. Lundqvist has masked a lot of the ills, and you start scratching your head and going, okay, we are in the toughest, or if not the toughest, one of the 2 toughest divisions in all of hockey right now in the Metro. It's a brutal slog to try to get in playoff position where 5 of the teams are going to make the playoffs and 3 of them aren't. You're outside the playoffs looking in right now. Mm-hmm. You're bleeding shots at an absolutely ridiculous rate. You've lost your best power forward. The guy who was supposed to be your offensive defenseman is now out. And you found out the reason why he struggled so much is you allowed him to play with a torn meniscus in his knee, which we can get into the comments that AV made earlier in the season when he had the summit with Shattenkirk and said that he knows he's not playing up to his potential and needs to play better. And Larry Brooks wrote about that as well. And if you add all that up into the mix and you start saying, okay, I got Rick Nash, who's a unrestricted free agent. I got David Descharnay, an unrestricted free agent. I got Michael Grabner, an unrestricted free agent. I got several other restricted free agents. And you think that the depth of your team in the future may be on defense, which is why McDonough could net the biggest result. And if you add all of these together, you can kind of start building that story as to maybe he should be the guy to go. Now, the flip side is it, and I'll turn it to you. Is Toronto going to give up a Michael Nylander, who's not the guy I really want? Or are they going to give up Mitch Marner, who's the guy I'd prefer, to go get a Ryan McDonough? And if they do that, are they doing it at the trade deadline? Are they doing it in the offseason? Because this is not with like Arizona with Keith Yandel, where there was a team going nowhere. And for them to give up a guy to get Duclair and a #1 pick made the most sense. You're talking about a Toronto team that clearly does need a blue liner, although if you look at the play of some of the guys they've called up lately, they may not need that blue liner anymore.
Well, let me just cut you off and answer the question. No, they're not trading William Nylander for anything right now. I mean, you see what he did last night in the game against Chicago. They're not trading Mitch. They're not trading Mitch Marner. He's a homegrown kid. He's very popular. He's I mean, they need those two players. They can't just rely everything and put everything on Austin Matthews' shoulders. JVR is a UFA. He may not re-sign with them depending on what Lou is willing to sign him to for an extension. So they're not trading those guys. Now, you can say, and we're live, obviously. You can say, well, then you're not going to get a top flight defenseman, but I think that they still can get a top flight defenseman. It's going to be from a team. And the guy I'm focusing on now is Ekman Larsson, because that organization is a train wreck of an organization right now. And they want young players who are cheap and future assets. And you would think that they would want to go in a direction where they'd want to build around, like they added Stepan and they added Yarmulson, and they still are going to be 31st overall or 30th overall. So I think that Arizona is going to go the way of adding future assets, especially if Ekman Larsson isn't going to re-sign there. So I don't think they're going to give up any other core forwards for a McDonough, who's at 28 years old, has got a lot of wear on his tires. He's a great player. He's one of my favorite defensemen. He's a playoff clutch performer, but he's been injured a bunch of times. He's logged a lot of minutes. I don't think they're going there. I doubt Ottawa would trade Erik Karlsson. I doubt he is not leaving Los Angeles. So I think Ekman Larsson is the guy who they're going to end up targeting, and it's probably going to be in the summer. So that's why I sort of chuckled at Larry Brooks's insinuation regarding William Nylander. It sounded like somebody wanted to float a price out there to set the market for McDonough, but Toronto is not going to pay that price.
So in terms of that, so I guess the things is, first of all, I know a lot of people who think that Brooks is I wouldn't say shill, but used by the organization to float out air balloons and kind of see if anybody, takes them and runs with them. And that's been an argument that some people have made, although granted, his column today about John Tavares has started people chattering already that is he switching sides and going to start covering the Islanders for them down the road, which like he used to in the past. And I don't think that's happening. But in terms of William Nylander, I mean, you mentioned Ekman Larsson, right, for Toronto. Are they willing to give up one of the big boys to get him if they decide to get him? And B, the second argument I'll make on that is with Ekman Larsson, does Toronto fancy themselves as a true cup contender this year? And would they make the move to get that blue liner right now for the hopes that he can help them for the playoff run? Or is there something they think they're realistically 1 or 2 years away, and therefore you're getting a future asset as opposed to one for just now and one more season?
Ek, what do you think? Because I'll give my opinion.
A lot of things there. Yeah. All right. So if you were to say, Jan, based on I'm sorry for being late, and I'm sorry if I bug out early. We've got stuff going on with my son today. He's getting better, but he is sick now with 102 fever. So that's a whole nother level of things we're doing. So I apologize for being late. And if I have to bug out a little bit early, I may.
Okay.
Not. Jan, based on like the Rangers, season so far and how well you think they should play, how would you rank this? Like between like say 1 to 10, 10 being this is the best they've ever played, 1 being this is the worst you've ever seen. Where are they this year? Well,
considering I harken back to the Theo Fleury and Sandy McCarthy days, I don't think I can give them a 1, and I go well beyond that. And I mean, to me, honestly, I'd probably give him a 3 or a 4.
Yeah, I think I think that's fair. I think that I was thinking 3 or 4, maybe somewhere in there. I mean, and this is the crazy thing about that, we say they're in the best division, right? They're in the best division in hockey. We're one of them. I mean, the division has been shaky this year. So I think we're looking out west. We've got 2 divisions out west that are pretty darn good right now. But even beyond that, they're 49 games in, right? And they're sitting there with 53 points. So they're 1 point, they're 2 points behind Pittsburgh with a game
Pittsburgh and Columbus, and they're tied with the Islanders, 3 points ahead of Carolina, with Carolina has a game in hand.
Yeah, and they're plus right. And Carolina's got a game in hand, but Carolina has been playing pretty badly as of late. As of the Rangers, the Rangers are 3-7 in their last 10. This is the worst streak they've had all year, and they're still so close to the playoffs. They're still a +1 in goal differential, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I mean, the Rangers have been historically a better team, as the year, as I think with the experience they have as the year goes on, right? I think you're gonna see better. I think that running away. If there were some hot teams in the Metro, really, really running away with it, then they would sit there and say, okay, maybe we don't have a chance. But this Atlantic, this whole Eastern Conference, with the exception of Tampa, is just completely. And even Boston, but Boston is.
Toronto, the Atlantic, the top 3 in the Atlantic is almost a lead cinch. If Toronto doesn't go 18-wheeler over the bridge or over the cliff, they're 13. I think they're 13 points ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean they've got Boston's opened up a 5-point lead with 4 games at hand on Toronto. So
I'm saying Toronto's a lock for a playoff spot, not for first.
They're a lock for a third right now. Like, you really are looking like. I mean, that's where they are, and that's probably where they should be based on the fact that Boston's had such a great year. But
to answer Jan's question, that I think that placement of Toronto would lead Lamb. I mean, if some team is out there and is offering a defenseman who they believe is a top 4 or somebody they can hold on for a number of years, they would make the deal right now at the deadline. I think that they're not looking at this in a window of we got to win this year. I think they're looking at we got to win in the next 2 to 3 years.
They're definitely not. They looked at talking to people around Toronto. They looked at last year like they overachieved, and this year they're about where they thought they'd be. They basically thinking last year they were a year ahead, and now they're basically, because they're almost the same. I mean, the record is basically the same.
They want to win a round, and that's
but as I was saying when we talked about it, so the guy I was talking about is Travis Dermott has come up and played really well for them. And granted, it's only been a couple of games, but he's solidified a role that they need, right? And if he's one of those guys who's in your top 6, right, and then you get Zaitsev back, right, and you have the other guys there. McDonough's a guy who also, when Riley's healthy, you can have those 2 guys run your power play. Oh yeah, a guy who can munch minutes and not have to worry about it. So that's kind of point 1. On the flip side, what you're talking about. So, and Mike and I kind of started the conversation on this, right? You have Kreider out indefinitely, who's your best power forward, who's a guy who gets a lot of garbage in terms of, look, I personally think, has he reached his potential? No. But he's also a guy last year who finally took that step up, came close to 30 goals, and a guy who scored some big goals in the playoffs and is a net front presence. You also have, and you don't know when or if he'll be back this year. Mm-hmm. Then you have Kevin Shattenkirk, who, as somebody unfortunately who's had a meniscus tear in both knees, and has had 2 different surgeries, one being an excision on one knee and one being a repair on the other knee. What hasn't been announced yet is, did he have an excision, which basically is literally just cutting the tear, or did he have a repair? Now, if you have a repair, in essence, what they do is put a fastener on your knee, and you can't bend your knee for about 6 weeks, and it's a longer recovery period because they do that if you're in an area of circulation, and they don't want you to have arthritis down the road. Now, if it was an excision and there was no other damage in the area, the hope is that he should be back in 4 to 6 weeks, and that's the hope, based upon especially being an elite athlete. Now, if you can remain in contention until then, that's great. But the problem is Brendan Smith has come in, and I don't think Smith has played badly per se. Granted, I don't know if you guys touched the Kyle Clifford hit from the other day, which is the retaliation by Smith was probably a silly move, but understandable, and probably ended up costing the Rangers a point, if not 2 in that game. But you look at the defense as a whole, that's underachieved dramatically, which was supposed to be the area that's improved on this team and hasn't. Then you look at the forwards, and who per se as a forwards had a good year? None of them. Now, you want to rely upon past history and records. That's wonderful and good. But at some point in time, where do you draw the line and say, you know what, guys, this just isn't our year? Well, and we need to cut bait, especially when you've overused Lundqvist the first 50 games of the season.
And this is where I think, the Rangers right now are in the position that the Leafs were in, I would say, about 10 years ago, with an aging Matt Sundin, with some good players, but they weren't good enough, and it was always patchwork. It was always hodgepodge. It was always at the deadline, let's add 2 players. Let's patchwork, complete patchwork, just to get in the playoffs, because they wanted, because the Ontario Teachers Pension Fund wanted a round or 2 in the playoffs. But that's not the way. That's not the way to run a team. And I don't know whether Dolan and MSG are hell bent on the Rangers making the playoffs just for the sake of making the playoffs in a couple gates. If that's the case, I think it's ill-serving to the franchise, because they do have some young guys coming around, and they can always use the prospects that they get from trading a Nash or a Grabner or maybe a McDonough. But the thing is, McDonough is a guy that I resign, maybe not for 7 or 8 years like he's probably going to want, but he's still a good defenseman, and I think they're looking at 3 or 4 years down the line when he'll start to trail off, and that's what they're worried about.
So here let me give you one piece of thing. So you guys may not have read the New York papers, but Dolan and his wife are getting a divorce. So that people are wondering as to kind of what it's going to cost him. And the jokes that have been around is maybe we can grant the Rangers to his wife and let him cover the Knicks. And that way then the Rangers can make moves to help themselves for the future and not focus just on the here and now. So that could play a factor in the determination of the direction that they want to go. It shouldn't. And you should be basing it on what's right for the team and the organization as a whole. Not a short-term view on whether or not you need to start increasing revenue for yourself and potentially to cover your divorce.
I would doubt that. I would doubt that he needs that.
I know a certain I know Phil Collins made sure that the Genesis did a reunion tour in 2009 because he got divorced and he needed to cover his alimony. So there you go. Nothing. And there's been wasn't the LA? I know the LA Clippers situation, wasn't there? I believe there was a divorce tied to it. There was another. Oh no, it was the Dodgers. It was the Dodgers with Frank McCourt. That's what it was. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. But
the Rangers are in that spot where a lot of teams are. I mean, this is not a common spot around the NHL. I mean, they're teams that are good and they might not be good enough to win the Stanley Cup right now, but also have the Cup right now, and could at any point and the goalie to do it. I mean, when you have a goalie, you very rarely see teams totally. This is why Montreal's not going to break it down. You don't see goalies, with this. Now, Lundqvist isn't going to play there forever, and he is getting older, and he is slowing down to a degree. But I don't think that we're there yet. I think we're a couple years early on this, like on the panic on the Rangers or the trading.
That's not panic. You have guys like Nash. You have several RFAs.
But they can't wait to get rid of Nash because they could do so much with that money. I mean, they want to do that very badly. I mean,
Nash has only a limited no trade.
12 teams he has to name. Now, look, I've been the one who's been carrying the banner for Nash beyond the scoring for the whole season, and since he's been here, he does everything else but score. The guy has. I mean, thank you, Mike Babcock, for making him a penalty killer in the Winter Olympics several years ago. He kills penalty. He basically plays in all 3 zones. The guy has been snake bit. Now he's finally got hot lately and had 3 2-goal games over the last couple of weeks, which has increased his total, I think, to 15 for the year. The guy has just been snake bit except for 1 year here when he scored 42 goals. Other than that, he has not panned out in terms of a score. But I'm the kind of guy, look, you're making $7.8 million. The focus rightly should be on what you're providing to that team offensively. The problem is what his number is salary-wise. If he was a guy making $2 million or $3 million, I wouldn't care. And I actually want him back next year.
And he's always been the same, and they've always been expected to be a bigger scorer than he probably really ever is. I mean, it's not his game.
He's got 400 goals in his career, but he's got 400 in his career.
Well, he's not going to be the guy. He's not going to be the guy who scored 50 in Columbus. But the thing is, he's a candidate in the summer if he signs the Eric Stahl deal, like a 3-year, $9 to $10 million deal. That he's going to be a home run for somebody. And the thing is that maybe people see his size, see his resume, and they say, "Oh, we got to pay him more," and he gets more. And then I think when he gets paid $5 million, then he's not as much of a bargain. But if he takes that kind of deal at the right place, I think he's a great ad. But right now, if you're talking about trading him at the deadline, I'm sure there are contending teams that would love to add him, but 7.8, the Rangers are going to have to withhold 50% of his contract just to get a return.
which is fine.
There aren't that many teams that can do that, and if they do, what are the Rangers going to want for it too? Because that's like another thing. I mean, in more likelihood, it makes more sense for the Rangers just to ride it out with him and try to win in the playoffs with him and try to see where they can go. Like see where.
I think there are a few contending teams that could fit a prorated $4 million cap hit. I mean, I'm sure that there probably are, and I think he'd be. But the question is, if those teams are on his list. Now he has said. I mean, that's the thing. It's like he has said he was going to use, or I had heard rumors he was going to use, whatever he could to prevent going. That he loved it in New York so much. But if he has a 12-team limited no trade, then he can only do so much.
Well, remember, you can always go to him and ask him to waive that no trade clause if you have a deal worked out, right? So, and B, according to Bob McKenzie yesterday, the Rangers have yet, keyword being yet, to approach Nash to give that list of 12 teams that he goes to. Look, I'm the kind of guy, I've said this before, if I could get Nash and Grabner back, each of them for 3 years, $10, $11 million, sign me up right now. I'd be ecstatic because I think both of them can play key spots on this team, and you can utilize that salary in terms of what you're saving from Nash elsewhere, especially when you have to make this key decisions on guys like JT Miller, Jimmy VC, and Kevin Hayes this offseason, and also Brady Shea, who, in my opinion, he's their future #1 defenseman. That's the guy I'm signing, not to a bridge deal, but to a 6-7 year deal like what happened with Slavin and guys like that last year.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that you're likely to get more for Grabner at the deadline than you are for Nash, because Grabner's salary is 1.6.
Yep.
A team like LA or teams out there that have limited cap space that are contenders, he's got speed. He's been able to finish a lot better with the Rangers than he did in Toronto. He's a veteran guy. He's a phenomenal penalty killer. That is the perfect third line guy to add at the deadline. And I think they could make a king's ransom by trading Grabner.
No, I completely agree. I mean, again, as you said, the salary is the key aspect. Look, the goals are nice, and granted, he's probably scored more than any of us would ever have expected him to score, especially after last year when everybody thought it was an aberration. But his speed, especially as a weapon in terms of just generically and on the penalty kill, and that's what he and Nash both provide also. Nash on the penalty kill has been great in terms of his ability to clear, granted, not lately because their Rangers have given up 7 goals the last 14 chances against on the penalty kill, dropping them from 2nd in the league to 12th. So it's kind of hard to use that argument right now, given how porous they've been in that aspect of the game. Look, I've been holding out most of the year. I've been a guy who's been a believer that I think they're going to turn around. I think they're going to turn around. Even when Kreider ran out, I thought they would turn it around. But it's kind of hard not to see the writing on the wall when you look at all the advanced metrics, and I'm not a slave to it, and even the eye test, when you just sit there and scratch your head game after game, when the same stupid mistakes are made over and over again. And it has to be either the individual coach or the coaching staff or the philosophy or some combination therein that's causing this issue. And that's why I'm saying there may need to be wholesale changes in New York.
And they simply just don't score enough goals to cover up for their. I mean, if you look at most championship teams, it's a great #1 goaltender, a #1 or two good defensemen, and strength up the middle. I think they have a #1 defenseman in McDonough. I like Brady Shea as a future guy. Lundqvist is among the best there is, but maybe he's starting to tail off. But after they trade Stepan, when you have like JT Miller and Kevin Hayes playing up the middle and David Desharnais, that's a cavernous hole, and you're not going to until like Lias Anderson comes in, until they maybe get in the John Tavares sweepstakes, if Tavares is willing to go someplace other than the Islanders, they're not going to fill that hole in the offseason. That's where Jeff Gorton's going to have to concentrate. He's got to make sure he gets centers.
Again, look, I agree with you. The center position has been weak. I don't think that's necessarily the end all and be all of all their problems. I definitely don't think it helps. But if you compare it to last year, right? Stepan was their #1. You had #2 is Zib and #3 was Hayes. Now this year you've lost Stepan. Zibanejad's moved up, who was playing great again until he got hurt. And the same thing happened last year, and he tailed off when he came back. Kevin Hayes has morphed himself from an offensive player to really a pretty darn good shutdown center as a #2 or #3. So to me, what you really lacked, and where Gordon didn't fill the bill, which is there's guys who I wanted. And I did not have a big issue with Desharnais. And actually, I think Boo Neves has been really good as their #4 center. To me, what was the lacking piece of it was getting that #2 or #3 center and also adding another scoring wing. Now, drafting Anderson, and kind of discussed it after draft, I think everybody expected Anderson to be that guy, and they were playing way too much, they're targeting way too much of their hopes and dreams on him stepping in the lineup immediately as an 18 or 19-year-old and filling that gap. And when they didn't, they got caught with their pants down because they didn't have a second option there. And they've mixed and matched, putting JT Miller, who's in my opinion ill-suited to play center. He's much better on the wing, though he's filled in at center. They've played Descharnais, they've played Neves, they've played Holland, they've played Carey. But the mistakes they're making isn't because their center play has been weak. It's because the system that they're using and the way they're playing it is just not necessarily preventing shots, and it's bleeding shots way too often, and there's way too many holes. I mean, when a system calls for 2 defensemen to go behind the net and leave the slot open, that's a big problem. When you don't have handoffs and communication and you have so many goals coming from in front of the net, that's a big problem. Why are you double teaming behind the net? Why aren't you handing off and replacing? And this is the same error you see over and over and over again on this team. So it's either A, the players are stupid, which may be the case, but I can't think that's all of it. B, the system doesn't work, and there's been 3 defensive coaches in 3 years, all of which have played the same system between Bukaboom, between Samuelson, and between now Ruff, and none of it's working. Or they've tuned the coaches out and they're just making the same mistakes, or an amalgamation of all of them. And I don't know which one's the answer, but you put it all together and you have a pretty damning case that it's not working.
Why don't we talk about today's blog?
Yeah, we'll get into that too. Did you guys get into Brad Marchand yet or anything?
Nope, we were saving it for you.
Yes.
We'll talk about Brad Marchand for a second. Suspended 5 games for the elbow. Marcus Johansson apparently has another concussion, which stinks because he missed November with a concussion.
Yeah.
And 5 games.
I have to say, watching it live, I was watching it live and I was watching it at regular speed. And at that point, I looked at it and I'm like, this doesn't look like much. And then when you slowed it down, you saw the chicken wing. You saw the arm come up in, like, as he's passing him by this. And he tried to sort of camouflage it, but it's Marchand. You know that's exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
But the thing is, this guy, and he's an immense talent, but this is, again, it's the star treatment in the NHL, a different thing for players who are stars than players who are, 3rd, 4th liners. If this was Matt Martin, he would have gotten, and he had 6 suspensions like Marchand has, he would have gotten 10 games. Alex Ovechkin gets away with bloody murder most of the time and sometimes doesn't even get suspended. Marchand, he's a repeat offender. Everybody knows he's a player who plays on the edge. I mean, I like that type of player, but he should have gotten more. I mean, when they said a phone hearing and he only got 5 games, I'm like, what does this guy have to do to get the book thrown at him? Because I thought that was what was going to happen, but apparently that's not going to happen.
So my view on this is, as you said, first of all, phone hearings automatically, the max you can get is 5 games. So once you hit phone hearings, problem. 6 suspension, second in less than a year. History in the league. Here's my view on how you handle this, and I tweeted this out yesterday. Make each suspension exponentially higher. You got 1 game the first time, your second offense, it's 2 games. If you got a 5-game suspension and you now have a second one that calls for an in-person hearing, you double it. Very quickly, guys will get the message that the garbage that they're dealing will be petered out and they won't be able to do it. Marchand is a repeat offender, regardless of how talented he is offensively and how good that line is with him, with Bergeron and Pasternak.
Yeah,
you have to send a clear message that this will no longer be tolerated. Yeah. Granted, 5 games is a hit, but if you're not going to really send the message, have an in-person hearing and say, look, this is the 6th suspension you've had. We are now going to take drastic measures and give you a 15 to 20 game suspension so you get the notice. Then maybe the coaches will get the notice, the GMs will get the notice, and owners will get the notice, and they'll stop the garbage, and you'll have a cleaned-up hockey league. Until that happens, this will keep repeating itself over and over again because there's not a big enough deterrent. Yeah,
and if you wanted something to slow down the Bruins, who are the hottest team in the league, the events of this week have slowed them down. Not Marchand's suspension and McAvoy having the heart ablation procedure where he's going to be out for a couple weeks. That's going to slow them down because that's arguably their best defenseman, young, or at least their best young defenseman and their best forward.
Yeah, no, I think, he definitely knows what he's doing. There's no question about it. It looks way worse slow motion for sure, but he definitely knows what he's doing. And I do agree it's light on the suspension, but I also think that Marchand is not going to necessarily learn from suspensions. I think he's the kind of guy who feels like this is what he has to do. Like he has to play this way. This is his game. He's going to do what he's going to do. I've never seen him hold up on anybody, in any situation that he's suddenly going to say, okay, I'm going to learn now because I'm not I don't know. I don't see it. I don't
Well,
see it.
But there's a clean way of playing. First, I understand playing on the edge. There's a clean way of playing it and a not clean way of playing it. And you can be physical and you can create space by your physical play, but also being clean and staying within the edge. Now, Marchand repeatedly goes over the edge, and maybe he thinks that creates space for him because guys are worried about it.
Right.
But honestly, you want to change the tone. It's not just him; it's changing the tone for others within the league to avoid stuff like this happening. Send a message right now. You've had how many guys run through as being the head of Department of Player Safety, and the same thing keeps repeating. What you're doing is not working.
I mean, he's not the biggest player in the world, and smaller players like Marty St. Louis and back in the day Pat Verbeek, they had to play on the edge a little bit, and they created their own space. But they knew the line. I mean, Pat Verbeek was a dirty player.
He was a dirty player, but I loved him in New York.
Right. And then, but the thing was, it's like he knew the line of where not to cross. And I've heard it said in hockey circles before. Sometimes it's good to take a suspension or take a penalty just to send the signal out there that this is what it's all about. And I get that, but I think that the signal, the little implant in people's heads is there with Marchand. Don't go near him because he's gonna hit you or he's gonna elbow you or do something. And he has to keep making reminders, and that I don't think
usually that's said about defensemen, not forwards. Like usually you'll say, okay, defenseman's okay, sending signals and stuff like that because you want a guy to keep an eye, keep his head up a little bit or be a little bit nervous when entering the zone. But forwards not really as much. I mean, you can't really do much.
I think it's because he's small. I mean, I think it's the smaller thing. He's not the biggest player.
Could be. Now today's before I have to get going possibly here. Hannafin's the name that came up today a lot. I was kind of surprised because I haven't really heard much of him at all this year. His name has been mentioned here and there, of course, but now it seems like two teams are having serious talks. Montreal and Buffalo, both serious talks about Hannafin. And the names I heard: O'Reilly in Buffalo's case, which makes some sense. Although I don't think O'Reilly's quick enough to play in Carolina, but. I mean, and that's my opinion. O'Reilly's speed is an issue.
Yeah, but he's a center and he's an effective center, and that's where they need to improve. I mean, we've talked about
a guy for 6 more years. It's $7.5 million a year. That's a huge cap hit for a guy, in my opinion, who's a number 2 center.
This could be. Remember, and we talked about this on a previous podcast. When Terry Pegula came in Buffalo, he immediately wanted to show his muscles, show his monetary muscles. And the first thing that he did was they traded for Brad Boyes and helped him get in the playoffs. And then in the following summer, they went on the bad direction of Ehrhoff and Billy Leno. But Dundon comes in, he's got money, and they're relatively close. Maybe they have a chance to make the playoffs, but they tailed off a little bit. But they need help up the middle. They need scoring. And I've said that all year, and they have an overabundance of defense. And the problem is with Hannafin, I don't think it's because Hannafin's not good because he's their all-star representative. It's the fact that he's an RFA next summer. They've signed Slavin. They've signed Pesci. They have Falk under contract for another 2 or 3 years. All of them are making close to $5 million or more. They can't afford another $5 million plus defenseman, and I don't think Hannafin is taking a bridge deal because there'll be an insurrection on the level of Jacob Trouba if they do that. So they may find it necessary to make that deal to get that scoring help that they need.
The logic of the deal I understand. I mean, and Hannafin's been the guy that's been rumored to be the one. Well, Justin Falk probably first.
Yeah.
But if they don't move Falk, Hannafin's been the other guy who's been rumored largely because what you said, given what Falk's making and given what Pesci and Slavin got, you got to figure that Hannafin's going to get about $5 million or more a year, based upon especially if salaries go up next year. And getting Pacioretty to me is a 1.5 year fix because after next year he's UFA. If I'm giving up Hannafin, I want a guy of a similar ilk or maybe a little older making money where I have him locked up longer term than 1 year. So O'Reilly makes sense to an extent. I just think paying a guy like that $7.5 million for 6 more years after this year is an overpayment. Now, you got Stahl still making $6 million for 7 more years off the deal he signed years ago. Rask hasn't panned out like you wanted him to. To me, the guys that you're going to have, and you got to figure out, is Elias Lindholm a center or a wing? And he's likely been better served playing wing. Teravainen is another guy in Aho. So, I mean, those are the guys to me are really the core of your team. I would want to bring in one more guy as a scorer. I just think paying $7.5 million, for Ryan O'Reilly for 6 years after this one is a gross overpayment and usage of salary cap.
And I know for a fact that, going back to the 2015 draft, Mike Babcock was imploring Mark Hunter to draft Hannafin instead of drafting Mitch Marner. Not to say that they don't like Mitch Marner, but if Hannafin is truly out there, I would feel fairly confident in saying that Lou Lamoriello has put in a call. Now, they may not want to pay the price that Carolina wants. I mean, if Carolina is asking for Nylander or Marner, they're going to tell them to go stick it. But I think that they would be in.
Definitely looking at Nylander or Marner.
Say that again. You broke up there for a sec.
That's what they have.
Yeah.
So, it's gonna take one of those two, and at least, and maybe something else. I don't know, but that's what it looks like. So that what I've heard with them is that that Jacob Trouba actually is higher up on their chart than Hannafin is, and that they look at Jacob Trouba as like, if they could get Jacob Trouba, they would consider. And of course, Trouba, can be his contract is only a little bit now and all that stuff, but so is Hannafin. Right. So you're in the same boat.
Yeah, and the thing with Trouba though, and talking Trouba Toronto, is the fact that the Jets are strong where the Leafs are strong. The Jets are strong at forward, right, and the Leafs have a lot of depth at forward. The Leafs don't have a ton of young depth. I mean, Travis Dermott, who Jan mentioned, who just got called up. He's 21 years old. He's a prospect. He's not even close to being established. Although a lot of people are encouraged by the way he's playing. I mean, a Jake Gardner deal involving Jake Gardner involving Trouba would make a lot of sense because Gardner's from Minnesota, close to Manitoba. He's under contract. They probably could extend him. But yeah, I mean that's going to be a tough deal to pull off, and I think the Leafs would definitely be interested in Trouba, but I keep going back to Ekman Larson with them. I don't know. Maybe it's just a feeling, but that's not going to happen until the summer anyway.
So, I mean, here with Trouba, my view is with the way Winnipeg's played, if they're smart, they keep him. Yeah, Tobias Enstrom's an unrestricted free agent after the year. He's likely gone. Myers has one more year after this year, and then he's likely gone. To me, overall, Josh Morrissey's probably been their best defenseman as a whole, with maybe Trouba behind it, and Myers has really had a return to form. But you've locked up Scheifele long term. You're doing what you've done so far lately without him in the lineup because of the injury. If I'm Winnipeg and I'm Cheveldayoff, I'm signing Trouba to a long-term deal, presuming he'll stay.
Well,
we want you to be the face of the organization defensively.
Right.
You're the guy we want. We're willing to open up the bank to a certain extent to keep you. Now, granted, he may want to go. Right. But the fact that they're winning and the fact that they're likely going to make the playoffs this year, unless something untoward happens, you have to see whether or not that has an impact compared to what's gone on in the past.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. If he wants to stay, then I think a deal gets done. But if he doesn't want to stay, he's 2 years away from unrestricted free agency. He probably signs a bridge deal and then he walks for nothing, and they can't allow that to happen. So if this is what, or get off the pot this year.
Well, if they sign him to a bridge deal, it makes it actually easier for them to deal him to an extent because you're not clogging up a lot of cap room and probably maximizes your return. But you need to be damn sure that he's not willing to stay before you make that deal, and also getting back fair value for a guy who's going to be that good of a future defenseman as he matures is really going to be difficult as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Finally, before I've got to go in like a minute here, I wanted your guys' opinion on the Russian team that was announced here for the Olympics. Is this the favorite? Like, do we see this as the favorite?
Yes.
And first of all, and how is it announced as a Russian team? This is hilarious to me. Like the Russian Ice Hockey Federation puts out their list. I mean, this is not a Russian team, right? This is going to be the unified team or whatever it's called.
Right. Well, I mean, we know it's the
Russian Ice Hockey Federation. It's about this is the senior Russian men of the games. It's such a, I don't know. The whole thing feels a little bit bizarre.
Well, I mean, we know. I mean, okay. That Russia hockey, their Twitter feed tweets it out. They announce it. We know that it's the Russian team. I mean, but it's not going to be that at the Olympics because of the whole situation with the IOC. But I mean, come on, it's all Russian players.
Yeah, I know, but it seems like I thought they would go a little bit at least to try to pretend to.
Yeah.
Say like this is the unified team, but anyway, it's not. This is the Russian team as they're calling it.
But to 2018 Winter Olympic champions, right?
Yeah, but to your point, they're clearly the best team in the tournament with Datsuk and Kovalchuk. They have two really good goaltenders in Sorokin and Sashurkin. So I mean, I think they have the best goaltending in the tournament. Defensively, you have a borderline NHL All-Star until the off the ice stuff, and Slava Voinov and Alexei Marchenko is a borderline NHLer. Period. But I think that and it's all KHLers from three different teams. I think it was Petersburg, Moscow, and Magnitogorsk. So they've played together too. That's an advantage as well.
I mean, you just look at the names, right? You have Datsuk, Grigorenko, Kaprizov, Kovalchuk, Shipachyov, Gusev, all these guys with experience in terms of forwards. And it's interesting. Markov didn't make the team. I thought that was a little interesting. Some people thought that he would make the team, but as you said, goaltending wise, I mean, look, selfishly, I'm looking forward to watching Sestjorkin hopefully play. Either he or Sorokin clearly will be the #1 there. And it is, quote unquote, a KHL All-Star team to an extent. And I was hoping for a bit more of a mixture in terms of the makeup of the team. But, obviously they felt the fact that, we got a pretty darn good shot to win a medal. And that team clearly blows away all the other teams in the league right now.
I'm also surprised a little bit that a guy like Samsonov didn't make it, but I think that, and this is how Russian hockey is. A guy like Nikita Zaitsev, he made certain teams in terms internationally, but when he made it clear that he was going to go to the NHL, they sort of blackballed him. Samsonov made it painfully clear that he's going to North America next year. I think he's the best goaltender in the KHL, and he didn't even make it. So there's even though they want to win the gold medal, they're playing their little political games as well.
Well, they always will. They always will for sure. But I've got to run, guys.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your help. Thanks, Jan. I will talk to you later on, and we will talk soon. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much.
Yep. We'll just finish off this, Jan, because I wanted to talk about not specifically about the Leafs, but the goaltender interference call. I know I was at the game on Monday. The Leafs lost to Colorado, but it wasn't because of that particular call. It was because in the third period they just let Colorado take over the game. But tied 1-1 in the second period. Austin Matthews scores a goal. It was a sort of a scrum in the front of the crease. Jonathan Bernier was coming out of the net, moving forward. Austin Matthews was moving in. There was what I would consider incidental contact, and then Matthews reaches over and knocks the puck into the goal with his stick. That was called no goal because apparently the butt end of Bernier's stick got caught in Matthews's jersey. Fast forward 3 days later, or 2 days later, a goal in the game last night where Artem Anisimov is in the crease. He is pushed by Roman Polak, but not like cross-checked, just pushed. And we know for a fact some of these players, they take advantage of the fact that the defenseman is going to push them toward the net so they can sort of interfere. Anisimov is in the middle of the blue paint. Frederick Anderson is prone down on the ice, and then I think it was Jordan Schmaltz came in or Schmaltz, not Nick Jordan. Schmaltz. Nick Schmaltz, thank you. There's two Schmaltzes. Nick Schmaltz comes in and beats a prone Anderson to tie the game. Now, that was called a goal. And this is where it is so completely subjective. I mean, if either you call everything that's in the blue paint no goal, a la Brett Hull, or that was the exception to the rule in the Stanley Cup final, or let Toronto handle it completely. I mean, all I know is that I thought one was a goal, the Matthews goal. The other one was not a goal, the Schmaltz goal. It has nothing to do with the fact that I'm somebody who's interested in the Leafs. It's the fact that I don't know where the rules are anymore. I don't know what the criteria is anymore.
Well, I think you've kind of spelled it out exactly. There is no criteria. It's all subjective, right? Trying to determine what is and is not a goalie interference is basically, as you said, subjective. There is no rhyme or reason. There's no clear guidance. As you said, when a guy gets pushed into the goal, what could he have stopped himself? Was he impeded or impacted by the defenseman pushing him? How did it impact the goalie? All those things have to be evaluated, and there's really no clear line to how to define that. That's the issue here. It's all gray, because as you said, the one with Matthews, although I love the play afterwards where he scored and pointed at the goal, it was a classic moment and probably one of the best moments all year that we've all seen as a direct result of it, because I think honestly he was showing, says, okay, take that, try to overturn that one. And usually what you see is a lot of times when there's goalie interference, you'll see the goalie complaining on the goal. In that case, the goal that Matthews scored, there was no complaining. Bernier had nothing to say, which was a pretty good indication that he didn't think it was goalie interference. But you know, when it also depends on kind of also what you have to evaluate is, where is the guy pushed into the goalie? Is he 5 feet away and nudged and falls forward, or is he literally on top of the crease and the guy really whacks him with a cross check and it clearly has an impact? And all of these things have to be evaluated. But that call, as well as the offsides call, the two calls this year that have driven me the craziest. And the offsides one should be the cleanest to clean up, and it's what I've tweeted already. View it as a bisected line. If the skate is bisecting the line, you're on sides. If it's not, and you're over the line with your skate in the air, then you're on sides when it bisects, you're off sides when it doesn't. Pretty simple. But you saw the video that Martin Biron sent out where his leg is over, his leg is not over. So even then, there's a ton of gray area. Until all of these gets fixed and we kind of clearly state what the rules should be, this argument's going to happen. And my opinion, Brett Hull's goal should have counted because it had no impact on Dominik Hasek in the crease at all.
Yeah, I think by next year they're going to go to breaking the plane, and you're going to have cameras on the blue line that will be able to, sort of like what they use in tennis. I know with tennis it's but it's going to be, you're going to be able to put basically like a field there, and you're going to be able to tell whether
what happens if your jersey's not tied down and your jersey's over the line.
No.
I mean,
we'll cover that on another.
All of that is going to be brought up because you know it's going to happen, and what's going to happen. Well, again, we'll get into a discussion at a time on replay in general, because replay in general has not become what replay should be in almost every single sport. And now every time you watch a game, the first thing I turn and goes, okay, let's see if there's going to be a replay of the call, because you can't even celebrate. And somebody said, the Super Bowl or a Stanley Cup is going to end on a call like that. You're going to have to bring everybody back on the ice and have them restart the game because it got overturned on replay.
Yeah, and if it's a Super Bowl, it'll be in favor of the Patriots. Okay, thank you, Jan. Thanks. Well, thanks to ACT for showing. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Jan Levine, for Eklund, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.